There are so many classic films that any channel can recommend on any given day. But what about the potential classics that may well have passed you by? What about the films that you may have neglected to love the first time around? Today on Independent Pictures, we're going to dive deep to uncover the gems that we feel didn't get the respect they deserved. In 1996, Tim Burton, the director that revolutionized the modern blockbuster with his Batman movies, set about making a project deeply personal to him. You see, Burton had recently done a film about B-movie director Ed Wood, and wanted to make the kind of film that Wood himself would have once made, only with the benefit of a blockbuster budget behind it. The result was Mars Attacks, a movie in which everyone involved seems to gleefully give the finger to the Hollywood blockbuster establishment. Firstly, Mars Attacks is based on a set of kids' trading cards from the 1960s, which Tim Burton felt was a reaction to all of the sophisticated Jane Austen and Shakespeare movies that were being done at the time. Secondly, this is the work of a director that seemed to be doing everything in his power to tear down the blockbuster epic that he had once contributed to. You see, Burton claimed that when he was a child, good B-movies, quote, never felt bad or cheap. They just blow your mind. He wanted to capture that childlike bliss with Mars Attacks, but to upgrade it with a higher budget, so to speak. Well, 3 years and $80 million later, Burton and his cohorts had made one of the single oddest sci-fi blockbusters you will ever see. So, Mars Attacks. What's good about it? The plot of this film centres on a race of Martians, short in both stature and temper, who infiltrate the planet Earth bent on its destruction. As such, it comes across rather like an absurd spoof of the brand of blockbuster prevalent in the mid-90s, with Roland Emmerich's Independence Day released in the same year. Thus, the film feels distinctly refreshing. Then there's the fact that Burton assembled a team so brilliant for this film that it truly boggles the mind. Firstly, there's the cast. Jack Nicholson, Glenn Close, Annette Bening, Pierce Brosnan, Danny DeVito, Jack Nicholson again, Natalie Portman, Martin Short, Michael J. Fox, Jack Black, and the iconic Miss SJP, to name but a few. Even Trump-supporting NFL legend Jim Brown was in on the act. Oh, and while we're on the subject of casting decisions,
Jesus Christ.
yes, that's right, they had Tom Jones. Now, it is unusual to have Tom Jones in an action-adventure movie, but hey, we'll take it. It was said that Burton's decision to hire an A-list ensemble cast for Mars Attacks parallels the strategy Irwin Allen used for his disaster films, notably The Poseidon Adventure and The Towering Inferno. But honestly, what's most notable here is just how much fun everyone seems to be having playing the roles. Be it Danny DeVito as a sleazy Las Vegas hustler, Tom Jones portraying Tom Jones, or Jack Nicholson playing both the role of President James Dale and that of nefarious businessman Art Land. Jack Nicholson fancied this idea so much he accepted the role without even reading the script. In other good news, Tim Burton made peace with legendary composer Danny Elfman for this movie. He and Elfman had had creative differences during the making of The Nightmare Before Christmas 3 years prior, and had not worked on Ed Wood as a result. Nonetheless, the two men resumed their prolific collaboration for this movie. The effects in the film are absolutely spectacular, in the most literal sense. Having abandoned his initial idea of traditionally Burton-esque stop motion due to budgetary concerns, Tim Burton opted for digital animation courtesy of George Lucas's Industrial Lights and Magic Studios, or ILM. The result is a breed of Martian invaders with a vivid yet oddly warm sense of character. These truly are visions straight out of a child's imagination, and will rarely be seen again in any modern action blockbuster. There is also a genuine sense of political dissidence in this film. Rod Steiger plays the bloodthirsty Secretary of Defense to perfection, and evidently, the exact phrasing of President Dale's plea of, "Can't we all just get along?" to the Martian leaders based on Rodney King's appeals to the public during the LA riots. Finally, in their original review, Empire magazine said rather definitively that only in a Tim Burton film could two disembodied heads profess their love for one another. So there's always that.
Love will never do what you want to do. Why can't this crazy love be more?
Now, to be fair, Mars Attacks, for which Burton got from Warner his biggest budget to date, around 80 million, turned out to be both a critical and commercial flop. Though the movie grossed over 100 million, it was a disappointment, vis-a-vis its inflated budget, and it didn't do particularly well overseas. In a nutshell, the overall problem for critics was that the idea of Mars Attacks works a lot better on paper than in practice, or to quote the great Roger Ebert. First he made Ed Wood, a tribute to the man fondly recalled as the worst movie director of all time. Now, Tim Burton seems to have made a tribute to Wood's work. Mars Attacks has the look and feel of a schlocky 1950s science fiction movie. And if it's not as bad as a Wood film, that's not a plus. A movie like this should be either a lot better or a lot worse. Mars Attacks plays like one of those 1950s movies that are not remembered as cult classics.
It's not unusual to be mad with anyone. It's not unusual to be sad with anyone.
Here at IP, we have to give Mars Attacks the firm stamp of a cult classic in the making. We think Mars Attacks is great entertainment at its best, and Tim Burton did an incredibly good job as usual. A common thread in criticism since its release is that some people may not understand the purpose and message of the film. Its mission is to spoof all those action and sci-fi movies that abound on clichés and laughable scenes, in which Independence Day is one clear example. This is the idea that Tim Burton had in mind. Mars Attacks is a great film and above all a very effective parody. Burton takes the opportunity to spoof and laugh with almost every aspect of contemporary society. Politics, religion, the army, television, greed in Las Vegas and other accoutrements of American consumerism. In this respect, the film can be seen as the purest form of cinematic anarchy. It's such a sarcastic view of America, and everybody falls under Tim Burton's wieldy axe. This is also a fun little satire on the American culture of assimilation, the great cultural melting pot. Mars Attacks dares to ask the question, what if another group of people doesn't want to be adopted into the American consumerist culture? The results are hilarious, as we have a group of Martians cynically working their way through the annihilation of the US, and the only people capable of stopping them are those who couldn't really care less about the American way. And as a fun bonus, unlike many of Burton's previous films, this seems pretty impartial when it comes to the satire. Everyone gets it here, not just the usual suspects. Here, New Age devotees and liberal advisors and generals are also made to look rather stupid. This is probably one reason the national critics didn't like this movie. Ultimately, Mars Attacks is like a mixture of Star Wars, Animaniacs and A Clockwork Orange. You may well like it a lot and believe it's the best movie you've seen in some time, or you won't understand a thing and feel disappointed. As many have pointed out before with tremendous accuracy, Mars Attacks is one of those movies in which you rarely encounter a midterm. You either love it or you hate it, but you should see it.
Independent Pictures.